if there's any readers of Old Testament wisdom literature out there, Ecclesiastes 11 talks about if a tree falls to the north or if it falls to the south, like where it falls is where it falls. And there was a thinker back in the 1600s named Matthew Henry who wrote about that, and he said, what that means is we're all called to do something of a great value wherever it is that we are.
Right.
Hey everyone, welcome to Here for the Health of It podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Dr. Randy. We're here with Dr. Tom, and we are Columbia's hottest and fastest growing podcast. And thanks for tuning in. All of you guys are sharing. We were in the top 2% of the most shared podcasts in our category.
We make up statistics.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. Adjectives and statistics, we're going to make
that. Oh, no, it's 98% content, but something like that. But we know you guys are all sharing the message out there, so we appreciate that. If you want to check out our Instagram, Here for the Health of It, it's HFTHOI podcast on Instagram, and we've got all our kind of behind-the-scenes stuff and clips on there as well. So we got a special guest today. His name's Franklin McGuire. He's a manager partner at Digital Brands, which is a digital marketing agency with a focus on executive visibility.
And I told you wrong, Randy. It's Heritage Brands.
Oh, Heritage Brands. All right.
The more we say it, the better, though.
All right. Heritage Brands.
Heritage. Everybody say it.
And I'm assuming executive visibility means you're in like the corporate world more than like building someone's personal page.
Yeah. That's so executive visibility, it's a phrase we've been using a lot over the last few months. It used to be a lot of people want to talk about kind of personal branding. That always feels sort of flat to me.
Right.
It makes me think of a guru. That's the phrase we use for somebody that's sort of a self-anointed expert, right?
Yep.
So you guys are credentialed, obviously in an academic and medical fashion. There's a lot of different ways to get credentialed. Some people are just, experts through the experiences that they've had. Hey, I've been a plumber for 20 years and I know exactly how to do this or whatever it is. So, we think personal branding brings up those images of the self-appointed, I'm a guru, I'm going to call myself an expert and maybe someday I'll get there. And hey, fake it till you make it. There's always some of that. That's okay.
I think that's what I'm doing right now.
I think there's a lot of that, and it's weird on social media because I'll talk to some people who really buy into the social media world, and they're like, "Oh, this person said this," and I'm like, I know that person, and they do not do any of the things that they're saying.
Yeah.
Or I know that that's not their house that they're standing in front of.
Or conversely, this person said this, and I'm going to build my whole next year around it. And you're like, well, who is that person? And why do you care that they said that? So. Long-winded way of saying when we think executive visibility, we're thinking business leaders, public figures, people that in general typically already have something that they've done. They've got a story that they want to tell, a story that they want to share, and they need help figuring out how better to do that. So most of our work ends up being actually this, so podcasting, thought leadership, LinkedIn work.
Cool.
And actually in the new year, book publishing as well. So, cool. It's an interesting little niche, but that's what we say we do. We help leaders and experts improve their executive visibility through podcasting, thought leadership, and book publishing.
And so I kind of got to just comment on this. So a guru in an industry like yours should have 2 buttons undone on their top button.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, at least 2.
I'm a big 2-button, maybe 3-button guy.
Ooh.
And Tom likes to go right to the top.
I usually go to the top. I'm just getting too big. I can't button this one.
Yeah, that's like a choking waiting to happen over there. Yeah. 3 buttons is guru, 2 buttons is, let's get a beer. I got to talk to this guy.
More approachable.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us about the names. Well, first Franklin, and then Heritage. Does anybody call you Frank?
They do. My grandfather's name was Frank, so he was Frank McGuire. So I always sort of felt like he had kind of a corner on that market, like that's his name, that's him. And then he passed away, and then my wife and I had our first baby, a boy, and so we named him Frank. So there's just sort of this, someone else has always kind of claimed that territory. But that said, a lot of people do call me Frank, and I will answer to it.
Nice, because I have my real name's Thomas or Thomas, depending on if you want to pronounce the H.
Thomas, I think we got to.
That's what I was wondering. Should I bring the whole name into play?
Tomas
is great too, right? when we get into the branding side of it, I got to figure out what I want to do with that.
Oh, there you go. Actually, it is funny. I have started professionally to utilize the junior in my name, so
really?
I don't run around, hey, I'm Franklin McGuire Jr., but there's a thought leader I follow. You guys might find this guy interesting. His name is David C. Baker. He's from Nashville, actually. So there you go, Brett. But he's based in Nashville, and he's got a book called The Business of Expertise, and it's brilliant. Red cover book, get on Amazon.
Sweet.
He's probably in his 60s, if I had to guess, and he's been working to help owners, primarily of creative agencies, for years to clarify their positioning and grow their businesses through that. So they've got a podcast called Two Bobs, very highly ranked in its category. It's been just a huge thing that I've, been really deep in for the last probably 18 months or so.
Nice.
But he goes by David C. Baker professionally, and it was for SEO reasons.
Not Dave Baker.
Right.
Because David C. Baker sounds great.
Well, and it's not even about how it sounds, right? So if you Google David Baker, and I did that early on when I was like, I want to read that thing he said. I mean, it's just a wasteland of David Bakers. Close cousin to John Smith, right?
Right.
But if you always have everybody calling you David C. Baker, David C. Baker, David C. Baker, most people are Googling David C. Baker, and he just owns that whole real estate on Google.
Huh.
So you'd have to talk to Johnny in our office. He's an actual SEO expert. I know just enough to not even be dangerous, but just to sort of wander around with my hands out in the dark,
Yeah.
But Johnny studied that for years, used to do it as a DoD contractor for the Army, and he's helped me learn a lot about it. So we kind of made the decision that Franklin McGuire Jr. So that is an initial part of trying to build that executive visibility is just, Tom Stetson, how does that rank and compare availability-wise and just digital real estate to Thomas Stetson or Tom Stetson Jr. if you've got a suffix.
Thomas J. Stetson.
Thomas J. Stetson, Tom J. Stetson, TJ Stetson. Kind of, there's decisions to be made on the front end, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. And then how about the name Heritage? How'd you come up with that? Is there anything behind?
Well, it was pretty funny because several months in on this several years ago when it was still pretty early on, I bumped into a friend from elementary school. I grew up in Lexington, across the river.
Nice.
And I had gone to a little school called Heritage Christian Academy, and my friend said, so that's kind of weird. You named your company after our elementary school. And I was just like, I hadn't even thought about that. So the real answer may be some creepy Oedipal thing buried deep in the brain. But the reason I thought I was naming it that, in some of my MBA marketing classes, we talked about what a concept of a heritage brand is. So lowercase h, lowercase b, heritage brand. Some people don't know that, but in the marketing world, heritage brands are a thing. Think of they're typically more luxury-oriented brands, consumer-facing, B2C. They're very old, though. That's they have this very deep brand equity because of the length of time that they've been in their marketplace. You might think about actually I wrote an article about this on LinkedIn a few months ago, so I should be remembering this better, but Beretta is a 527-year-old company, I think. Beretta markets, and they should, but they don't necessarily need to. Nobody's wondering if Beretta knows how to make a gun, because back in 1587, somebody in Venice said, we're going to start doing that, and then they just never stopped.
Right.
So the brand equity from the amount of time that you've been in the market, that's typically the hallmark of a heritage brand. Stateside, you might think about like a LL Bean or a Filson on the West Coast. In Europe, you might think about Hermes, Rolex, Land Rover, Barber, Burberry, brands like that. So I just really cottoned on to that concept in school. I thought, man, that is really cool. This idea that because of the length of time that you've been in the marketplace, you've just developed this incredible brand equity. But looking at you guys, looking at me, I mean, we're all pretty young and we're just kind of on the front end of trying to get things done. There's no way I can go back in time 500 years ago and start whatever it is that I want to grow, right? Like you guys started your chiropractic practice when you started it. And so we're all trying to figure out what are those ways to accelerate the growth of my brand equity. We can try to cheat the system, and people do that. Those are the 3-button guru guys, right? So we're not really interested in cheating the system at Heritage Brands, but we are interested in saying, what's the roadmap?
Yeah.
What playbook am I reading off of? How can I learn what some of those different levers are that I might pull to deepen my brand equity more quickly than if I just didn't pay any attention to it?
Nice.
That's good. And so someone's looking for a digital advertising company, because I would say that probably a lot of business owners have been burned in the past.
Oh, yeah.
And myself included, where they promise the moon, or you'll just take meetings and they promise the moon, and you kind of know it's not going to go anywhere, but you don't really know. And then it all kind of goes sideways a couple months in. But I'm curious then, what are the things that someone should look for in a digital marketing company that would make them not use them?
Oh, I'm really glad you asked that question, because I myself have been personally burned by probably 6, I think is what the latest count is up to. I just got to be honest with you guys. I hate marketing. I just don't like it. I don't think of us as a marketing company. I started Heritage Brands out of a need because I owned an e-commerce brand that was growing very quickly and aggressively. I was actually getting my JD MBA here at Carolina at the time, was doing great, top 10% of my class. I did well in undergrad. I've always enjoyed school. But I had started a vacation rentals company in Charleston between undergrad and grad school. And when I moved up here to date my now wife, I'm in school and I'm thinking, this is odd. I don't think this is bad that I'm in school. My old roommate from the Citadel, he and I had, tied for class rank, and he went off to Harvard Law. So he's like, Franklin, you're going to love it. Law school's awesome, But I'm there and I'm thinking, I used to work really hard down in Charleston, and I made a lot of money through that really hard work. Now I'm working really hard, and I'm not even just not making any money. I'm actually negatively paying money for the privilege of busting my ass in contracts class, right? And I just thought, something about this calculus feels off, and it was like a lot of cognitive dissonance for me. It was very frustrating. And we can go more into that. I mean, again, you guys are credentialed experts with medical degrees. My credits at the law school expire in a few months, so I'm going back next year to finish because I got 1 semester left. I'm like that guy that swam from the burning ship, almost got to the island, was like, I'm going to turn around. So I'm going to finish the journey. I'm going to get to the beach. So I do think there is massively a role for higher education, for graduate study. I would argue that a lot of people jump into it too quickly. It's I don't want to go into real life yet, so let me just go do this. And I don't really know how dollars work. I don't know what debt is, so I'll do that. But I digress. So I started an e-commerce brand from the front row of Professor McWilliams' contracts class. And, it came out of my experiences in the Army. I thought, there's all these brands out there. We've all seen them, Grunt Style, 9-Line, these very in-your-face kind of, I'm an American, And don't get me wrong, I am as patriotic as they come. I love this country. I can almost get emotional about my love for this country. I mean, you guys are a beautiful example of what the free market and free individual will and the opportunity to pursue passions, interests, own a piece of land that you have deed and title to, own the IP behind your firm, what you're building, what you're growing, pull in the talents of other people to help you do that. I mean, these are incredible things. And as somebody who's traveled all over the world, lived all over the world, different times in my life, that's just not normal. It's just not common, right? So I thought, where's the military and patriotic brand that speaks to something even deeper, that speaks to some of what we feel when we watch Band of Brothers, something that we feel when we think about our granddads and great-granddads that stormed the beaches in Normandy, or for me, my great-uncle was stormed the beaches in Normandy.
Or Will Smith in Independence Day.
There you go. So for me, I thought I love going to the gym. I don't want to wear that stuff, but I would love to subtly, love the fact that I'm in this nation's military. I wear the uniform, but I don't want to do it in this ridiculous way, right? Subtlety is key. So that's where Civvy Supply came from. Civvy meaning civilian clothes, the civvies that we wear, supply kind of referring to, where you go to get all your gear. And that brand just started to grow, and it was going gangbusters, and there I was trying to run a warehouse and trying to run this team and also trying to make it back in time for class, and it's just crazy. So I was outsourcing as much as I could, and this is my way of bringing it back around to your question, Randy. I was outsourcing as much as I could. I thought, marketing, I think that's a thing, that's probably important. And specifically social media. We were getting more orders from social media. I had guys who were on their 12th and 13th order with us who had just found us through Instagram. Okay. Excuse me. I mentioned Filson earlier, and their creative director, Tom Kartsadis, former creative director of Ralph Lauren. Excuse me, Tom Kartsadis is the owner of the brand, creative director. It's a different guy whose name I'll think of in a second, but he found us on Instagram, bought some stuff, had it sent to the Filson headquarters. I was like, dude, this is awesome. This is wild. Working. But I was spending 3 and 4 hours a day on Instagram to do what I thought right looked like. And I thought there's got to be somebody I can outsource this to. So that led to this just pain point. I talked to all my friends in e-com, all of whom had much bigger businesses than me. And they said, man, that's a huge pain point for us too. Let us know if you find somebody, we'd love to hire them too. So a guy like me, I only hear that so many times before I'm like, man, there's another business in there. So that was sort of the genesis of what became Heritage Brands. And we focused very extensively on e-commerce, social media, influencer marketing. And there's a story of how it's grown into the executive visibility side. But trying to give you the whole context here of my answer to your question about what should a local business look for when they're thinking about marketing. Guys, I just think you got to be so careful. I mean, the listeners of this show, I love what y'all are doing with Here for the Health of It. I think it's awesome. The listeners of this show, the kind of budgets that folks in this town have, I mean, just be so careful about hiring quote-unquote marketing companies or marketing agencies.
Right.
Our listeners may have heard of the PESO model, PESO. When you're thinking about media and content, think of it under those 4 buckets. So paid, earned, shared, or social. I've seen it both ways, or owned. And I believe that we're entering the golden age of owned media on owned channels. That's exactly what we're doing right now. You guys own this media podcasting. You own the channel of Here for the Health of It. Doesn't cost you anything to do it. I mean, it does cost something, right? These are nice mics. This is a nice recording board, a nice studio. You've got an employee here helping out. He's got a nice hat. He's got a very nice hat. I was digging the PlayStation sweatshirt, actually. Yeah, that's a pretty good Christmas sweater. I like that. So, owned media on owned channels is so important, right? And so a lot of that, you need to make investments. You need to know where to point the cannons, but entering into a long-term relationship with somebody that promises you, X ROAS on your ad spend, or we're going to do these amazing things and hit this many followers and yada, yada, yada. No one has more passion about their business than the business owner. Sometimes they need some help on the front end. Like, there are people better than you at this thing, but if you can kind of figure it out, I know there's a book right under my seat. You guys are self-educating on it. That's awesome. Just do that, right? Like, don't spend those marketing dollars. I don't know. I'm just kind of sour on it because I've been burned. I lost $35,000 on Facebook ads the month of August 2018 or 2019. And I've got it on a sticky note in my office. And I'm just like, never again, man,
Right. Well, that's what we were trying to figure out is like what, even looking at social media, are there certain statistics or things that click rates or ad spends that should turn into, I would say the average local business just doesn't even know how to measure something that people are promising as well. Which is, I think that's the frustration we got. It seemed like it was doing well month 1, month 2, but then as you started to learn what they were doing, I was like, well, nothing's changed, and we're, the formula I feel like didn't change during the dip in the promise that these companies would give. So I think, speaking a little bit to that, do you think people should more hire internally and just produce a ton of content, like the Gary Vee kind of model, where it's like just bring the people close into your business that live it, breathe it, feel it, and just pump out a ton of video and photos that way?
That's a good question. I think it varies. I'd probably have a different answer depending on what type of business person asked me. To speak to a couple of the categories that are very near and dear to all of us, I mean, I think for you guys, education, like prospect education is key, and prospect awareness. And so put that on the shelf for 1 second. We'll get to that in a second. I've spoken a lot about executive visibility, expertise, the business of expertise, that David C. Baker book. I think for anybody that's in like a professional services lane, if you are selling based on reputation, based on expertise, based on being a credentialed expert in something, there's a lot kind of under that category that we could dig into, but I think it's about positioning, and I think it's about showing yourself to be that expert. It's making visible what already the reality is, and just showing yourself to be that expert. For you guys, you do trade off reputation for sure, and you do trade off expertise. Some of that expertise doesn't need to be over-established, right? I was at the dentist last week, and I did not demand to see his dental license when I sat in the chair. You know, it's just like, I actually have absolutely no idea. This guy could be Catch Me If You Can, you know, for all I know. I have no idea. Why didn't I concur? If you guys have seen that movie. But so I think for you guys, that's a little bit less of a thing. But if I owned a practice like this, you know, I would be thinking about, you know, we're talking about chiropractic. What do you say? Chiropractic.
Yeah.
So we're talking about chiropractic, and you know, just before we got on the show, I was explaining to you guys how, you know, I myself am a believer in chiropractic care. It's been an important part of my wife and I's wellness plan. Our infant baby got adjusted within a week of being born, and he slept like, I was about to say like a baby. That doesn't really work, does it?
I know.
But he was sleeping through the night at 2 weeks, you know, so we got him on a schedule, we got him adjusted, and we were fortunate, obviously, but I think it all was connected. So for a business like y'all, you know, I'm thinking about who are all those people out there that don't know the benefits of the care, and how can we create the educational content that they'll find and sort of start to self-educate.
Right.
So we all know about like that customer journey, and we're working on a project right now with some guys in Idaho, actually. So we had a 2-hour strategy call with them yesterday. We're working on a strategic roadmap for them right now, and they created a supplement company that they took from zero to a $200 million exit in 4 years. I mean, the story is just incredible. And it's especially incredible because these guys have no ego. I mean, they just are the most humble. Honestly, like it feels like such a blessing just to get to talk to them and hear their story.
Yeah.
So, you know, I asked them, I said, well, how in the world did you guys do this? Like 0 to 200 mil in 4 years. That's unbelievable. And we had their VP of marketing, their CMO, on the call. He said, you know, in the beginning, we just focused on educating people. It was supplements for gut health. And he just said, you know, there was many stages of our customer journey, but like at the top of that funnel, we just focused on being teachers, on educating, and on showing our expertise that way. And then people, as they became aware of the problem and mapped it to their own gut issues or health issues, if they self-identified as like, oh yeah, I think that's me, then they went into the funnel in different places and were served different things along that.
That's good.
But at the very, very top, I think, you know, it's deep in human nature to want to tell stories. We've been doing that, you know, for at least 20,000 years with our words orally, right? We've been writing for the last few hundred of that. So what are the stories that you ought to tell? You know, what's something that you can teach to somebody else? And that's, this is a little bit of a reach, but I keep thinking of Randy's question about, you know, local marketing companies and kind of this like, feeling that I have around them. I think that's what's frustrating is so many of them, you know, if you look at them and you're just honest with yourself, they're small businesses, they're local businesses, you know, these guys and gals are just trying to get their kids through school and pay the car payment, whatever else. They see a lead, they see a prospect, and they think, oh my God, I have this opportunity to sell them on this like monthly retainer. It's amazing. I got to get this.
Right.
What we've done in our business is, you know, outside of like 6-figure huge deals, you know, we just do like one-off projects to get people set for success. The focus is to teach someone to fish, because I could fish for somebody all day long, but, you know, after a few months, you know, the value starts to kind of get clouded by the price, and the retainer invoice starts to feel like a bill. And you kind of get to that point that you mentioned, Tom, of like, we're 4 or 5 months in, and I'm kind of like, what's going on here? So I'm much bigger on teaching people to fish and just focusing on, you know, if somebody has an agency they're running and they think they're really good at something and they've spent years studying it and just going 1,000 miles deep in this 1-inch wide thing, teach it, you know, to the extent that you can, just teach it. I think that's the most honest way for any local business to show that they're not scared of that, if that makes any level of sense.
Yeah.
And then where would you tell them to start? Because there's all kinds of different educational programs out there. And you can go, in a business like ours, we could go based on just like health education, which most people have no clue. They go to their doctor, they ask them what to do, they do what the doctor says, and they haven't read books on it, they haven't learned it, they haven't spent time on it. But then there's the other side about, let's say, how the actual adjustment works, or how our rehab works, or if we have other things or tools, how those things work. And I feel like sometimes it gets clouded in, are you educating about the service? Or are you educating about the body? Or are you educating about health? And what's the conversation to figure out which one you educate on?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I've got this image in my head, if you guys can kind of envision this with me, it's of 3 interlocking rings. So it's sort of the Venn diagram with that extra circle right underneath it. And I think that certainly for you guys, but for any local business owner who might be listening to this, or somebody listening to this who might want to start their own business. Like, again, we live in such a vibrant market economy. I love hearing those stories of people saying, I was doing this job for a while and I felt like I saw an opportunity to do it better. Then I started my own business. For anybody that's listening, thinking about that, I think, you need to think about 3 things. And I'll say the 3 and then we'll unpack them. So it's the value of your time, it's your passion, and then it's your customers, whoever those prospects are. So unpacking that a little bit, you need to think about what's my time worth and what am I willing to buy versus build? Like, if we've read stuff about software companies or tech startups, it's always this question, do we build or do we buy it? If you, I came in here kind of in a bad mood. You guys got me feeling better again, but I went to Panera freaking Bread in the Vista to grab a quote unquote quick lunch. And I ordered it at noon on the app. It said it'll be ready at 12:10. So I left my office on Laurel Street a few minutes before it was supposed to be ready. I roll in at 12:13. I'm thinking, well, my sandwich will be a little bit cold, but that's all right. And then I did not get that sandwich in hand until 12:45. I stood there in that little sweaty hallway in the back, just for over half an hour. And I thought, with what I bill my time at, this 30 minutes, this was a very expensive sandwich, And that's all fine. They were busy. It's the holidays. I'm an eternal optimist. I can only get mad about stuff for about 3 seconds and I just forget about it. So no big deal. But I just say that to illustrate when you're thinking about building something or buying it, self-educating it and getting some kind of a course versus maybe getting a coach or getting an agency, you got to be thinking about that value of your time, right? If you make, $250,000 a year, your time is worth $300 an hour if you work 40 hours a week. I can't quite remember the math, but any of us can grab the back of an envelope and do that math. So just be razor sharp when you're thinking about, where should I invest my efforts?
Right.
Should I start a podcast, right? Tom and Randy are doing it. Seems really cool. Seems awesome. Or should I start writing more? Should I think about publishing that book? Should I think about, creating that Instagram channel? Well, how long is it going to take? What's the value of your time? Does it make sense for you to do it? Does it make sense for someone else to do it that you're paying? Or does it just not make sense to do that? But that's just one of our circles, right? So we need to think about, I'm actually going to jump to the third one, customers, because if you decide, I think writing that book is what I should do. I think that's definitely where I should invest my time. I could see it working for you guys, right? Because it's in American culture, a book is the ultimate sort of signaler of expertise. You say, well, I actually wrote the book on it, right? Or at least a book on it. So a book is very powerful for many people. But if your business is power washing and you've got this power washing empire, maybe we write a book about growing a power washing empire, but you're not going to write a book thinking that it's going to get you more power washing customers, right? And the amount of time and then the mismatch between your prospect and what you're doing, that's just a total whiff, total miss. So we need to be thinking about value of time. We need to be thinking about prospects. Who are my prospects? Where do they live? What kind of media do they consume? And then we need to be thinking about that third thing, which is passion. So, we produce podcasts for a handful of our clients. It's a lot of work, right? So on some level, you guys would not be doing this if you didn't think it was really cool to just talk to local business owners and to do it in this medium and in this fashion. So people under-index all the time on passion when they're trying to sit down and map out the perfect marketing plan. What are you super interested in? That's just so important. If you're a financial advisor and you love LinkedIn, but you're trying to start a podcast and you don't know how to do audio engineering, like you're missing. Let's focus on maybe long form copywriting, educating people on LinkedIn, maybe creating a dozen evergreen articles that you can point prospects to that last for years and years and years, right? If you are, what's another good example? I've got a friend who is a pretty big time lobbyist. He and I are starting a podcast together in the new year, just about a passion project. We just love leadership. We found it so interesting. He's an Army buddy of mine, fellow Citadel grad, and we're just going to interview leaders, and that's all that we want to do. So we have that passion to do it. He's not very interested in LinkedIn. I've told him for years, like, hey, that could be a really cool way for you to grow your business. But he loves Twitter and he loves barbecue. And believe it or not, like that channel for him, because he loves it, it's a way to connect. It's a way to stay top of mind. It's a way to stay present. So just keep those 3 rings in mind, like value of your time, passion, and then customers and prospects. You got to find that kind of magic right in the middle of that.
Yeah, I think typically we as business owners jump to like, let's just pay for that instead of really taking it through that filter of like, all right, what do we want to spend our time on? I think that's an excellent point. And we look to outsource it probably too quickly, maybe, and just because we don't want to develop the skill set.
And I don't want to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but there is a give and take there on that, right? Like, we are spending an hour together here. That's 2 hours of 2 chiropractic doctors' time. How many patients could have been seen? What kind of revenue could have been made? Now, all that said, you can't hire somebody else to like be you on a podcast, and you guys have this passion for it. But if y'all are finding yourself spending a bunch of time, like, let's say, again, with the caveat that I don't necessarily love marketing, I don't do paid. I mostly just lose money on it. But for you guys, probably like geocaching or geofencing Colombia and saying, how do we get people in Colombia who are Googling chiropractic care, they're wanting to educate, that there is a strategy there that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And if you guys are finding yourselves spending 6, 8, 10, 12 hours trying to self-educate on Facebook ads, like, don't do that. Do what I did when I found myself doing that and just spend that 6, 8, 10, 12 hours finding that perfect long-term partner who I now have. Happy to refer you guys to him. But find that person because, you're going to overinvest your time on it. So it's a fine balancing act of build it or buy it. And if I'm buying it, am I buying it through a W-2 or through a 1099 or through an agency with invoices? Is it one time? Is it long term? All those things are kind of in that decision matrix. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you were pumped, so your first business was the shirt business? Is that?
Yep.
And then to solve the problem that created, I guess, Heritage, what did you start exploring when you realized, like, all right, I'm now the solution, and I'm going to create Heritage as the...
Yeah, and actually, that's a good way to describe that journey that we've gone on from being sort of an enterprise-level social media management agency, which we still dabble in. We're still very good at that. But we're shifting our business from that to just narrowing our focus down on leaders and public figures for executive visibility. And the reasons underneath all that were, when we started doing that for other people, we were, the only way to do it and do it right, guys, is just spending a huge amount of time inside the platforms. Like, think about it this way. Facebook, Instagram, Meta, they're in the business to make money. They make money by serving ads to users. To be able to report successfully that those ads have been served to users, there needs to be a user who's actually engaging on the platform. Right. So always follow the money trail. We all know that, right? And so what I saw in the 3 different agencies and 1 freelancer that I hired with Civi Supply, all of whom washed out after 90 days. I always give people 90 days.
Yeah.
Like, try it, see if it works. And it didn't. They did what we call post and ghost. I mean, they just kind of, they showed me a really pretty little report in Hootsuite or Sprout or whatever else. And, we got this neat content. And sometimes they'd go and even help you make the content. Which looking at now, I'm like, I mean, those people were just, I mean, they were trading time for money in such a negative way. It just, and that's why you so often see people thinking, oh, I'll be a social media marketer, because they know how to do it. If you got a phone in your pocket and you're under 40, like, you know how to do it.
Right.
But it's impossible to scale. It's just going to be some kind of solopreneur, solo act. And if that's like helping that young mom like get through school or something, that's awesome.
Right.
But it can create a value mismatch between the client and the service provider. And it can amplify those missed expectations and unrealistic expectations. So we realized that the only way to grow a brand on social was to spend a huge amount of real human time in the account. That was one core component of it. So we literally had like over a dozen Wi-Fi only phones at our office for years that were just like the client account phones.
Yeah.
And we would have junior level employees, interns, just get into that account. Here's your list of hashtags. Here's your list of geolocations. Here's your list of other like avatar users that we want to check out their followers on. And we would just be in there. We just putting thumbs on screens. That's what you had to do. But that's only one part of it, right? Like you've got to be putting great content out, and you've got to be engaging with the user base. So we did that. We did it for a few years. I think it went well. We helped a number of companies and some e-com brands grow pretty significantly. It was a rewarding journey in a lot of ways, but taking stock of everything over the last 6 to 12 months, we were looking at some of our favorite people to work for and the people that we really thought had a story to tell that we could really help impact. And we kept coming back to it's the public figure clients that we have. We've got some pretty major politicians that we work for, some of whom, folks locally would know. And we had some leaders that we were working for, and we just kept thinking, I think it's helping business leaders and public figures improve their executive visibility through these channels that we've gotten really good at, that owned media on owned channels, which for us, typically podcasting, thought leadership, and book publishing. And we thought that all this work going down the river of like the ongoing, just day-to-day social content, communicating with people, it feels like it ought to end in like an ocean of something. Like, where does this go, right? Back to my sort of, I don't like long-term retainers. Nobody does. At some point, it starts to feel like a bill. It's like, where does this kind of land and end? And I kept coming back to a book, A book is, again, the ultimate signal of authority in our culture.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to tell our clients, hey, this book, like, we're working on it and it's going to get published next quarter or next year or whatever it was. And our clients wanted that too.
Yeah.
So a few months ago, I just started networking with publishers. I just said, you know what, this is the journey that I'm going to go on. We've got a great team at my office, so I get to focus mostly on the front of the ship, where are we headed, and they kind of focus on where are we now and where were we, And it all led, to make a very long story short, to us actually hiring a former VP of publishing from Forbes Books, so the Forbes magazine business people.
Nice.
And her first day was yesterday. So, we've now officially added, book publishing to the stack. I wouldn't call us a publisher.
Right.
Heritage isn't a publisher, not yet at least. But that's going to be a really big part of what we're doing in the new year.
But what I wondered about a book is like, how long is that book powerful for? So say like we produce a book and it takes a year, it gets published 1 year from now. How long does that have, quote unquote, like clout, or that you can continue to utilize that book? Is it like another year, 2 years? And I know it depends on how good the book is, of course, but
yeah, and there's a really good specific To Bob's podcast episode about this. It's called The Rungs on the Ladder of Lead Generation. I think it was published in like August 2020, so would certainly point people to that if they wanted to kind of learn more about that. But to answer that specific question, Tom, we would really need to spend a long time, more time than we have today, just to figure out, is a book even right for somebody? Because that is not a small expense. That's a huge amount of time. It's a huge outlay just to even do that.
Right.
And sometimes you get people doing it, and it's just this kind of like glossy business card, and you're like, why did you do this, Mr. Power Washer?
Right.
But if they think that it does make sense for them in their business, it kind of just comes down to the person, how much they're willing to engage with that. So y'all mentioned Gary Vee and his whole idea of taking one piece of content and turning it into 12 or more things. Right. I think the book lays the groundwork for projecting that expertise and amplifying that authority through public speaking, through conferences. A lot of conferences today won't even invite somebody to keynote or maybe even speak unless they are a published author. So that's sort of even just kind of a foot in the door. It can be something that is sent out to clients, sent out to prospects. It's something that a second season of a podcast can be built around. So I don't know if I'd, focus a first season if somebody's starting a show like on the book, but a second season could be, interviewing people that make sense within this space. So I don't know. It's not a really clear answer, but it's sort of permanent for forever. Right. Tom Stetson, published author, that's forever. But it's also just sort of what are you willing to put into it? And that goes back to those three rings: time, value, passion, and prospects. If your prospects are an incredible fit for that big outlay of writing a book, you can run with that for longer than you would be if it was like, well, it's not really what my people really need, but I just want to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
So then, this is kind of like a three-part question, but we started the podcast partially because we just wanted like a fun, creative outlet because everything we were doing was just clinical. It wasn't. So we wanted this to be fun. And then also because people wanted to keep having meetings with us, so they would say, oh, you need to meet this person, you need to meet this person. And it was just a hassle to say, when can we meet? Where are we going to meet? How long are we going to meet for? So we just created this thing where we said, and I don't think I've taken a single meeting in a year and a half, where if someone says, oh, I want to meet with you. Great, our podcast is at this time, and I have to be gone by 2. Or they'll say, oh, I have a person you really want to meet. Great, ask them if they want to be on the podcast. And then they come on, and then it's just set for an hour. It's a set time for us every week, and we always know when it's going to happen. So there was that, and now we've accomplished that, and we're doing that. But then the first part of my question would be, how do we know if we should double down on this or if we should just keep rolling with it and having fun and doing what we're doing? Because there's always the question of, do you focus on getting more people to listen to this and hear this? And do we focus on spending more time getting guests, or do we just keep getting guests that we personally want to talk to and hang out with?
Totally.
And then the other side of that we did the same thing. So I did a book in 2014, and it was because it's called Fully Alive, but it was because I kept telling the same stories over and over and over again to every patient. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to write them all down. When a person comes in, they're going to get this book, and they can read it all. They'll know my whole story. They'll know me. They'll know why I do what I do. And it was kind of cool. So it was like it was more like a bio. There's some testimonials, things like that, and that was cool. And then my wife was running into the same thing where she was getting nutrition questions over and over and over again. So ended up doing this cookbook, which is called what's it called?
Feast or Family.
Feast for the Family. Feast for the Family. And it's good, and it's really good. So really a person, and it's a nice way, because if a person comes up to and says to us, hey, I'm really interested in nutrition, can you help me? She says to them, yep, read this book, and then come ask me the questions about it. And then you find out pretty quickly, if the person's willing to read the book, then we take their questions seriously. If the person says, no, I just want to waste your time and ask you things that I'm never going to implement, then we don't do that. So we've also run into, now how much do we focus on that? Because we don't really know. We know that there's a market for it, but we don't know the time value of talking about a cookbook versus the time value of now, chiropractic and helping a person in the clinic itself.
Totally. Yeah, there's some good questions in there. And before I even try to answer any of them, I just want to point out how wise that was of you guys and your wife, just to think through, tire kickers are such a real thing. I had somebody come in my office the other day, and I thought they were a pretty good prospect. I thought we were going to do some business together, and then it just, oh my God, like just a huge waste of time. Yep. Like Panera sandwich times 10, and I just thought, man, Franklin, what a whiff, man. You really missed on that, And so while wanting to be an engaged member of the community and just be a nice guy, like life is short, like be a good dude, right? So of course we all have that in spades, but there's also that sort of, man, I work about 50 hours a week and that's it. Other than that, it's hanging out with, baby Frank and the wife. So I appreciate that you guys used these types of content actually as almost like gatekeepers. What I would say is that the next layer to that is, and it depends on what people sell, but if you go deeper into that lane of thinking, you can start to get to a place where people want to pay you money who don't know you at all. So I've mentioned David C. Baker a few times in this conversation. Shout out to my boy. I love his work, right? Some friends of mine who run a branding agency are working with him right now. His key program is called the Total Business Reset. It's $26,000. He probably spends, I would have to guess, like less than a dozen hours with people who buy it. So if you do the dollar for dollar, like, value per hour that he's got on those customers, it's unbelievable. He espouses a lot of the views that we espouse around content, book publishing, making yourself a visible expert within your space. And I happen to know, I don't know if people are supposed to know this, but he has, nearly 1,000 right fit prospects in his sales funnel that he just hasn't even touched. Like, these are pre-qualified leads that have raised their hand to say, I want to buy your $26,000 program. And so what I think is really incredible is I myself would love to buy that program. And I've never met him. He doesn't know me. He's never met me. I've never talked to him. I don't know his people, as we say in the South. I don't know anything about this guy, but I have consumed enough of what he has to say that I believe that he's an expert and I want to give money to him.
Right.
So for you guys thinking about, you've got this book, this podcast is a little different because I think what this podcast does is shows y'all to be engaged members of the community and people who want to see your city be a healthier city, which it makes it better for everybody, right? There's a huge amount of social good behind that. But the Fully Alive book, like that would be something, Randy, that I would want to like dig into more deeply and say, is there more behind that? Is there a way to get that out or use it in such a way that, people engage with it and whatever else might be behind it, and they say, oh my gosh, like I have to be a client of this guy. And again, y'all's client mathematics are very different than a $26,000 thing. So we would want to just think that through a little bit more and say what's right for y'all in your business. So that's just kind of some assorted thoughts around that. But to try to nail your question there, Randy, about, do we double down on the podcast or do something else? All comes back to business goals. So you guys have probably seen the TED Talk, Start With Why, Simon Sinek. It's awesome. And in the Army, we always talk about backwards planning, meaning where are we trying to go, which I think is the heart of that Start With Why, and then let's backwards plan from there. And the other cool thing that we talk about in the Army is the 1/3, 2/3 rule. And that's one that I haven't really heard a lot of people who have heard about that outside of the Army. So I'll teach that and put that in you guys' toolbox today because it's an incredible way of thinking about planning versus implementing. So in the Army, when we get given a mission, we are supposed to spend 1/3 of the amount of available time for that mission just planning the mission. So that's 1/3, 2/3. So if you've got a week to get something done, like you really ought to be spending a day and a half or whatever it is to actually just plan that out before you start implementing it. And that's the other problem I see with a lot of smaller marketing agencies or solopreneurs. And there's a problem on the client side too, because you guys hire somebody and they're nervous but also excited because the dog just caught the car and they're like, yeah, I got some money now. And you guys are like, oh, I'm spending some money, so I want to see some ROI, everybody's favorite phrase. And there's no planning, It's post start tomorrow, or you start delivering next week, or whatever it is, and that just flies in the face of what the world's greatest leadership organization, the United States Army, has figured out over 250 years of doing this and doing it well, right?
Right.
So when we're thinking about that question, do we double down on the pod? Do we do something else? I don't know if I have an answer without digging into sort of the mathematics of your business, your customer base. Where do the prospects come from? How do we find them? How do we serve them? How do we keep them? But just make that white space, make that white space for planning, because the 1/3, 2/3 is very powerful if you backwards plan and actually, figure out ready, aim, fire, not ready, fire, aim,
That's good. You have a lot of whiteboards at Heritage?
Oh my God. I have 3 double-sided ones on wheels in my office, plus one huge one that stretches across the whole wall. We've got a really old office. It was built in 1897, beautifully restored.
That was the litmus test.
Tom keeps buying whiteboards that we have no space for.
Buying whiteboard paint now to paint walls.
Dude, I love it. I love me some whiteboards.
So your whole journey is interesting to me, just your pathway. So you grew up in Lexington. What made you decide to join the Army or Citadel? I guess Citadel is the entry point to the Army.
Yeah, so I actually I had a grandfather who went to West Point, and I really wanted, God knows why, but I really wanted to go to Princeton for some reason, and then I didn't get in, and I was really pissed about that. And so
was it because why do you think you didn't get in? Grades?
No, my grades were awesome. My SAT was awesome.
Volunteering. You weren't volunteering enough.
Yeah, it could have been that, And like in college, I wanted to be a Rhodes Scholar and a Truman and a Fulbright, and I got like into the red zone on all of those. Never got into never got the TD. Right? It was just sort of like, man, this sucks. So I don't know, but it didn't work out, and stuff like that used to really grind my gears, and I've gotten really zen. If there's any readers of Old Testament wisdom literature out there, Ecclesiastes 11 talks about if a tree falls to the north or if it falls to the south, like where it falls is where it falls. And there was a thinker back in the 1600s named Matthew Henry who wrote about that, and he said, what that means is we're all called to do something of a great value wherever it is that we are.
Right.
And so I used to get really bent out of shape if my tree didn't fall in the place that I wanted it to. And it's been sort of a recent, newer journey to say, man, like what am I missing in this place that I'm in right now? What am I called to do right here? And that speaks to abundance mentality and just, trying to live with no fear, no shame. That's all just stuff that I get really hyped up about. But weirdly enough, I had applied to get into West Point as well, and I got in. I got my congressional appointments, passed the academic test. I was so stoked. I was like, man, I can't believe I got in. But you have to take a PT test to
pull-ups and stuff?
To fully do it. Yeah, pull-ups, sit-ups, all this stuff. I was a pretty fit guy, and I took a year off. I had my gap year, and I lived in D.C. I was an intern in government up there, and then I went and lived in England for a little while. Got a little crazy, came back, was in great shape, and I thought, I'm going to crush this PT test. I'm not worried about it at all. Practiced all the different events on it, but there was this one event called the basketball throw from the knees. I was like, what is dumb? Like, what even is that? I'm not even going to practice that because I can get on my knees and throw a basketball. It's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And the day came, and I went on down to Lexington High School and met up with the Army recruiter and took the test, and I failed the basketball throw from the knees. I crushed everything, like everything.
What is it? Like overhead? Like you're just
forward,
overhead?
just on your knees, overhead throw on a basketball court as far as you can. And I think the minimum distance, I forget the exact foot count. It was something just for round numbers like 50 feet or something.
Yeah.
I threw it 49 feet. So I missed it by 12 inches, but all was not lost. They, like the guy up at West Point said, hey, that's super weird, but don't worry about it. We authorized you for a retest, but the admissions window closes in 2 weeks. So, like, you have to do this retest within 2 weeks. I said, great, I'll schedule it for like tomorrow. And that night, I got sicker than I've been in my entire life. I don't get sick. It's not really a thing. I don't like being sick. And I went to the doctor the next day and had walking pneumonia. Like, my left lung was so full of gunk. So he said bed rest, yada, yada. I was like, man, I'm not a quitter. I don't want to quit. So I still went on the last possible day of the retake window, still sick as hell. And I was like, I'm just going to take it anyway. I took it. This time I passed the basketball throw from the knees, but my run time doubled because I couldn't breathe. And then I told the West Point guy, I was like, can you like mix and match here, dude? And he was like, nah, I can't. Like, I'm so sorry. He said, like, you're in for next year if you want to wait a year. But, at that point I was like, nah. So went to the Citadel. Was very blessed to have a full ride down there, and so I still went to school for free, but I didn't have to like go into the Army. So I actually left and went into the civilian world. I worked at a tech startup, did sales for them for a couple years, left and helped some other guys start another sort of consumer finance company.
So you just always were like into like entrepreneur stuff and like to be, because I thought like, all right, you went to like design? Did you design the T-shirts, or how did you come up with T-shirt design?
Yeah, I sketch them all out. Like, really? I was an English major in school. I don't know how to use Adobe or anything, but I'm very creative. Like visual, very visually oriented. I've always loved industrial design, stuff like that, and so I just knew in my head what I wanted. I sketched it out. Found a girl up in Vermont who did a lot of the early designs for me, and. It's just been a crazy life, but I mean, I love creativity. I love storytelling. I love business. I love entrepreneurship. I love creating economic value in communities. I think that's awesome, and I love leadership. Like, those are the things that just really get me going.
Did you guys sell any tank tops in the?
We did. You want one? I'll bring you one.
Randy's
a
big
tank. It depends on what color.
Oh, heathered gray, man. Kind of athletic fit, heathered gray,
that
super soft.
Look good on me.
Yeah, man.
We would love tank tops. You know what else I was thinking though too when you were mentioning? Let me see my note here. No, I can't even read my freaking
This is
notes.
what Tom. This is what Tom.
You got a lot of notes.
Like.
I'm impressed.
I draw
man.
arrows. I circle, then I cross out.
That is good.
From the T-shirt design, you went into what was the next thing?
That was Heritage Brands.
Straight to Heritage Brands.
I tried to kind of manage both for a little while, and then it was just too much. You got to know when it's too much. So my brother, one of my best friends in the world, he was active duty Army. He was an infantry airborne ranger, super high speed, HUA guy. He was at the Old Guard up in D.C., Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, that sort of thing. And he said, "Hey, I'm ready to transition to National Guard. Like, I'm moving back home. Let me run the business." Cool. So he runs Civi Supply today, and under his leadership, it's just grown tremendously. He's gotten it officially licensed by the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, Marine Corps is coming soon. And we're sold in, I guess, a couple dozen military museums all over the country now. You can buy it at Pearl Harbor, buy it in, I don't even know where, all over the place. So it's really cool. He's doing some awesome stuff with it.
Yeah, can you spell it so that people know?
Yeah. So Civi Supply is CIVVIE Supply. It's like civilian clothes.
When did you meet your wife during all this?
Well, I put too much stuff into too small of an amount of time, as you guys can tell. So happily, I met her when we were 15. So she was early on.
Lexington girl.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, she was an Easley girl from the upstate, and we met at a camp. And then our families kind of got to know each other. She went to school down here and just stayed close with my family. And, we'd always kind of known each other, but hadn't ever been super close. And then I was down here one day and dropped by my parents' house for like an after-church lunch or something. Wasn't planned or anything. She was there. I was like, "Man, Franklin, what have you been like missing here? Let's go." So I told her, I said, "Hey, I've got to be in town on business this week. You want to go get lunch?" No business that week at all. But she said, "Oh, sure, let's do it." So I walked out of that lunch. Where'd we go? Cantina 76 on Main Street. And we were there for 3.5 hours. And I walked out of there and was like calling my jewelry lady. I was like, "All right, I'm going to marry this girl."
Sweet.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I produced some T-shirts in my day, but most of them just have my face on them.
Oh, let's go.
With golf ball, I've done some golf balls. Nobody's buying them. I'm purchasing them and sending to my friends.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love that.
And then Brad has a crush on me. He's hung this autograph photo of me up here. So
man. I thought that was going to be mine for being on the show. I get an autograph photo, right?
Yeah, we need it.
Yeah.
You know what we should do is we should have the faces print of everybody when they come in. We autograph and make a little
plaque or something.
Yes.
Oh, it's like one of those touristy restaurants down in Charleston. It's like we had this B-list celebrity here one time. They ate at this table.
I love it.
All right. So, and then kind of in closing here, tell us what's next on the docket for you, or is this where you're at right now? Yeah,
this is where I'm at. So 2023 for me, I get very introspective at the end of the year, and for me, it's just next year is a year of focus, of saying, I've always been very obsessed with opportunity. I think probably entrepreneurial people are wired to be really obsessed with opportunity, but I've been challenged to be more obsessed with success than with opportunity, because we're surrounded by opportunity, and that's great, and it's always going to be out there, but I really want to lean into just getting 1,000 miles deep in this one place and creating the best possible version of this that I can, and just going all in on that and picking up my head in 10 years and seeing where it took me.
Good
stuff.
And then anyone who you can think of who we should have on the podcast, someone that you think is really interesting or in the Columbia area that we should highlight.
Yeah. I would say you might want to talk to, God, I'm thinking my brother's come up in this, Johnny Matthews, our VP of operations has come up. He was signed to Atlantic Records at one point, toured 250 nights out of the year, ran a recording studio in LA, started a recording label. He's an awesome guy. I get to spend every day with him and I love it. But thinking of people outside of like my very, very immediate orbit, I know on this show I mentioned my friend in branding. Her name's Christine McFadden. She is a partner in Devote Studio. They're actually out of Birmingham. It's a very large, very successful, very highly skilled branding company. But they have an office on Divine Street, and she runs the local office. Really? And she's just one of the most brilliant people with branding. I mean, we don't do branding at Heritage Brands. Like we do the specific part that we do of helping clarify positioning, amplify executive visibility. But I'm hoping that they'll do a full rebrand of the actual, visual identity of our brand in the new year.
Yeah.
Cool.
And if anybody's ever looking for that, they're just tremendous. Yeah. So
cool. Nice. And then if someone wants to reach out to you, if they're a business owner listening to this, how do they do that? What's the best way?
Yeah, I would suggest LinkedIn. I've been told that I can sometimes be a little bit hard to get a hold of. So ping me twice. If I don't respond the first time, it's not a big deal. I just got a few things on my plate. But LinkedIn, and that's the place where I'm going to be focusing in the new year on doing more of my own publishing, trying to take a lot of this stuff that we've learned and put it out there for people. So I have at least 2 or 3 articles pinned currently, but one of them is titled How to Think About Thought Leadership. And a few of these podcasts and books and things that we've talked about are linked in there. So that's a great place to start if people are looking to learn about all this.
That's great
stuff.
All right. Well, thank you for being on. We appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you guys for your time, and thanks for doing this. This is awesome.
We're here for the health of it.
For the health of it.